There's a lot of snow up here.
Looks to be a cinnamon phase black bear. He's going up the tree.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Barrier, Barrier Outdoors podcast. Today we are on our way back from quite the adventure this morning. We had the day off from work today, so we decided to load up the truck and look for some steelhead up on the river, the Salmon River up in Pulaski, New York. So it was a good adventure. Lots of things to take away from today, lots of experiences, and it was a good time. Should be a pretty good story. So if our audio today sounds a little funky, a little off from what it normally does, we are in the truck right now, headed back home. We've got a 2-hour drive ahead of us, so we decided to get on here and tell a story of the day and some of the things that we had to take away from it. So this is our first on-the-road podcast. Welcome to it.
Yeah, so first time doing Steelhead, right?
Yeah.
Up in Pulaski. A couple things I wanted to go over was mainly gear. So this year I haven't gotten to use my waders a whole bunch. I have the Simms Freestone waders. They're uninsulated with a booty, so you could use whatever shoes you want. And I'll start at the bottom with my boots. I forget what specific, I believe they're Simms too. The Python, I think, or they have that ratcheting system. I had merino wool socks on, and those in my booties from the waders. And my feet weren't too cold. So maybe another like weight thicker of socks might have been nice. Otherwise, my feet weren't too bad. It was about 19 degrees.
Yeah, it was probably about 20 degrees most of the day.
Yeah, so I was expecting it to be around like 30, but I didn't look at the right time or area for the temperature. But so I have those. My feet were okay. And then I have flannel lined jeans on, and I was tempted to put long johns underneath them. And I think for about 19, 20 degrees out, I think if you had long johns and then some, flannel lined or maybe a thicker pant, then you'd sort of probably be okay. So if you didn't have like a thicker pant, maybe flannel lined, and maybe 2 layers. It's hard to say, but you'll just have to experiment on your own and figure that out. So I was going to do another video here down the road and talk more about the Simms Freestone waders and sort of figure out what the optimal amount of clothing to where you feel comfortable and warm but not too constricted as well. They are I would say a skinnier person's type of waders. The legs aren't terribly huge, so if you have like bigger legs, then maybe try another pair of waders. But other than that, it was pretty cool. We were about a month early for things, but like Cole said to me earlier, you were saying that now's the best time to catch the big ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from what I read, this time of year is when the most large size steelhead get pulled out of the river. So in closer to March, the steelhead will come out of the lake and they will do their spawning. So how it works is in the fall time, around October, early November, the king salmon will come out of Lake Ontario and they will run up the Salmon River to spawn. And so they'll lay their eggs in the river and then they'll die. And so then what happens is the steelhead, they come out of the river and they follow the king salmon up the river so they can feed on the spawn and the eggs that the salmon lay in the bottom of the river. So what happens is those steelhead will hang over. Most of them will hang over in the river until spring when it's time for them to spawn. But this time of year, the winter, today's February 18th, so we're a little bit early for the rest of the steelhead that are still hanging around in the lake to come up and do their spawning. But the bigger ones that hold over in the river all winter from that feeding in the fall are still there to be able to be caught. But
it's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
not gonna lie.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It's crazy how that works. And so from the top, we'll just talk about like the difference between a steelhead and a rainbow trout, which is a very interesting topic because a steelhead and a rainbow trout are essentially the same fish, although a rainbow trout lives its entire life in the river system. So these fish that we are fishing for are not originally native to Lake Ontario, because a steelhead is what's called so a steelhead is an anadromous type fish, and the definition of anadromous is a fish that spends most of their adult lives at sea but return to fresh water to spawn. And so the recreation of that life cycle in Lake Ontario eliminates the saltwater part of that equation. So it lives the majority of its life in the lake, which is a substitute for the saltwater, and returns to the rivers to spawn. So that's what we're seeing here with the steelhead. They are, in quotations, leaving their saltwater or their big lake life cycle to come to the river to spawn. So we're fishing for those fish when they are making that journey back into the river. So that being said, this time of year isn't necessarily the best time to catch numbers of steelhead, but the larger fish are still in the river this time of year. So this type of fishing, this trip was way outside both me and Keegan's wheelhouse. This was the first time we've ever entertained an idea like this, but we figured there's nothing stopping us. We have a 2-hour drive. We have fly fishing gear. We have waders. There's a great tackle shop in town that we stopped in that hooked us up with some flies.
Fat Nancy's.
Yeah, Fat Nancy's in Pulaski, New York. If you are in the area ever for any kind of fishing, stop in there. It's a super, super cool store.
Cool store. You know, the whole town had a real cool vibe to it. And I feel like when it's a little busier, it's probably a pretty cool town. If you're any bit interested in fishing, it's probably, a real cool place to hang out and probably talk to a lot of people. We talked to a few people today, but everybody was pretty cold. It's a chilly day, so we were sort of, hey, what's up, and keep on going.
Wasn't a conversational kind of day today. Yeah, so for sure, the culture in town is super cool. It's a fishing centered town. Tackle shops on every corner, drift boats in everybody's yard. It's a cool change of pace from our hometown, where there's just really currently it's more of like a highway, natural gas kind of town. So that's the culture in our town, but it's super cool to see environmental centered culture in a town. So our day started at 5:00 this morning, bright and early. We met at my house and made the 2-hour drive from Northeast PA up here to the Salmon River. And like we said, we stopped at Fat Nancy's, talked to a nice fella behind the counter in the shop, and he pointed us in the right direction of the pools to fish, target today, and some of the flies that we were going to use. And so that being said, Keegan talked about his gear when we first opened up. Which
I would like to hit on that again, but go ahead.
Right now?
Yeah. Well, you could, whatever you were getting at.
Yeah, so essentially the type of wader you would want to use this time of year, a lot of guys will use a neoprene wader, but breathable waders like Keegan Sims Freestone, and I have the Orvis Clearwater waders. They are plenty capable if you layer, like Keegan was saying. And
very easily it's capable. You could get it done. It's just you got to be smart about it.
Yeah. The water temp today was like 34, 33 degrees, so it was, you saw the occasional slush pile floating by as you were fishing today. But in terms of tackle you would want to use, I was using a 6 to 7 weight Riversider rod with a Redington ID 789 reel. Ideally closer to like a 7, 8, or even a 9 weight fly rod. Something around 10 feet would have been more optimal, but
I'll jump in real quick too. I was using the Orvis Recon, I believe it's called. It was a 6 weight as well, and it just felt a little like underpowered, I guess. Like we were icing up a lot, which that's totally new to me. With not fishing, in such cold weather. So you'd cast for a bit, and then eventually your eyelets would freeze up. So I went to break some of the ice off the tip of my rod, and I wasn't really giving it much, and the tip of my rod actually snapped off like 2 inches off the top. So it just felt like a rod that's supposed to be nimble for fly fishing, and I think we need something a little bit sturdier for what we were doing today. So definitely looking into other alternatives. But luckily, Cole said that I could send that rod back to Orvis and they'll fix it for me. So,
yeah, it just goes to show when you pay for higher quality gear, the company's going to take care of you. Yeah. But yeah, like Keegan said, we're used to fishing trout streams locally that are probably 20-25 feet across maximum in most places. And the sections of the salmon we were fishing today were probably closer to 50 to 60 yards in some places. So like a longer 10 foot or 10'6" heavier weight rod would have been ideal for the waters that we were fishing. But so we got up into town around 8:30 this morning, got out of Fat Nancy's and we headed upriver. The Salmon River is about 12 miles long from the confluence where it meets into the lake and the dam that creates a reservoir. So at the top of where the fish will swim to, where they'll migrate to, is a dam that holds a reservoir, and that dam controls the flow of the water in the Salmon River year round. So today we were fishing probably around 750 CFS, which means cubic feet per second, which is pretty incredible to think about because a cubic foot is about the size of a soccer ball. So 750 soccer balls were flowing by per second in the river. So if you put it into perspective like that, it's a pretty hefty river.
My brother would like that, being a civil engineer.
Yeah, so it's crazy to think that much water is passing by every second. So we took that into account as we set up our rigs. We ran a 8-pound tapered leader, which led down to 6X tippet, which is about 8-pound test also, with some stonefly patterns and egg patterns. And like I said, those steelhead come up into the river to feed on the eggs of the king salmon. So those egg patterns, they'll start to fade out this time of year because there's not too many eggs left in the river. But those stonefly patterns are going to appeal to that steelhead's trout side of their nature. So we fished that. We put some split shot above that to help us to get down through that quick moving water. And then above that, we ran what's called a thingamabobber, which is essentially a strike indicator, or very similar to a bobber you used when you were like 6, probably fishing in your grandpa's pond. But it's a super effective way to get that fly to the depth that you need to in fast moving water like that.
Which I want to hit on that too. With all that extra weight on the end, if you're using a fly rod, it's very different. If you've been, training to use your fly rod with just a fly on the end of it, it's really different having a lot of that weight. It's like a mixture between a spinner and a fly rod.
Yeah.
So that's something to take into consideration. We saw a lot of people using spin casters, so
and center pins too, which is essentially a fly reel with a super smooth bearing in the middle, so it free spools. So you'll fish under a float or a bobber, and you'll fish spawn sacks. So you can collect from the salmon in the fall the roe out of them after you catch them, and then this time of year for the steelhead, you can put them in spawn sacks. And the center pin allows you to get much longer floats. When you fish a fly setup, you only have from about 11 o'clock to about 2 o'clock where you get optimum float out of a fly setup. But if you use a center pin, you can cast that to 11 o'clock upstream, and you can let that float as far as you want downstream as long as your reel has the line for it, and then you reel it back up. So it lets you cover a lot more water. But one thing we weren't used to today was the crowds. Like, I'm sure in the fall when the salmon are running, or later in the spring when the steelhead are in, the crowds are probably a lot thicker, but we're not used to seeing people fish 20-yard gaps in between each other. And so that's a culture and
something that you're used
interactions that you would have to get used to, and the etiquette, that's the word I was looking for, that would go into where to step in, where you need to step out, what to do if you hook into a fish and it takes you downstream. So that's something I'd definitely like to do some research into. Yeah.
Just to be courteous, like, you don't want to mess somebody else's, trip up.
Yeah, for sure. So that was definitely a little bit of a culture shock for us today. So learning how to navigate those good fishing holes with other people in it is something that we'll definitely have to continue to develop in that line of our fishing skills down the road.
After lunch, I guess we'll start with lunch. So we went to Arby's to get lunch, and there was a hit and run at the Arby's
in the parking lot
while we were there. It was wild. Never seen that before, so that was interesting. So after that, we went to a spot we passed earlier, and we went underneath this bridge and found a good spot where there weren't any people there, and it felt like a pretty good spot. So we were fishing there for a while, and I'm pretty new to tying some of these fishing knots that go along the lines of fly fishing. So I sat there for a little bit in the sun, which was nice, warming up a little bit. And I learned how to do the surgeon's knot, which was the knot to a pretty common knot from what I saw on YouTube. I had to YouTube it real quick. I'm pretty sure he was showing me it earlier, but he was quickly doing it for me to get ready to go, because we were ready to go fishing. So I sat down and actually learned it. So that's that's the cool thing about trips like this, is like you'll come home with something that you've learned or tried something new. So I sat down, and for people listening that are familiar with this knot, it's a stupid easy knot. It's just like I didn't know it, so I sat down, and I think I'll remember it for the rest of my life. It's a very easy knot. So if you're starting to get into fishing, definitely learn the surgeon's knot. But we were there sitting and casting, and Cole starts walking up, and he looks under the water and finds filleted out
steelhead. Yeah.
So
yeah, it was crazy. We were probably 100 yards downstream from a boat takeout, so what I'm assuming is like a guided trip, probably filleted it and then just tossed their carcasses in the water. But seeing that fish, like, as gross as it sounds to pull a fish carcass out of the water, put into perspective.
It was still in good shape. It must have been fairly fresh, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, and the water being almost freezing temperature probably helped to keep it in not disgusting order. But that fish put into perspective what we were targeting. And it's crazy to think that there were multiple fish that size, and it was probably, its live weight was probably close to 10 pounds, I would want to say. And so seeing that fish put into perspective what we were actually getting after. And I don't want to sound cheesy by comparing it to like river monsters, but a 30-inch fish that weighs 10 pounds in a river that size that we were wading in all day definitely put perspective onto our goals for the day.
Yeah. After we saw that, I was definitely a little bit more excited to catch something. Like, if you caught something like that on a fly rod, it's probably exhilarating.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to get back up here in a month or so when things pick up and give it a try again. And our odds will increase. So
yeah, I think so too. I think a little more research into the fly fishing tactics. A lot of what you see out there online, if you want to find some really cool content about Great Lakes steelhead fishing, there's a guy on YouTube called Adventure Chasing. His channel used to be called XXL Chrome Chasing. He's an outfitter or a fishing guide in Michigan, in that area, and he chases the steelhead that come off Lake Michigan. So if you want some conventional tackle ideas, you can go check him out on YouTube. It's a lot of what I looked at this week before coming up here. But the fly fishing aspect is a lot harder to find. So before we come up next time, I'm going to do a lot more research on how to fly fish for steelhead, because a lot of what you see out there is center pin drifting and spinning reel. There we go. Drifting with spawn sacks and beads. So catching one on the fly rod is definitely the priority for me over like a spinning rod. A center pin I'd be willing to give a try just because it's similar, and it's I find a cool concept. So yeah, those are definitely going to be up there in the books for the next coming months as spring starts to heat up a little bit, and it won't be so cold that our eyes on our rods are freezing.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
It was pretty satisfying to take your thumb and snap them all out of there. It's pretty cool. So yeah, so we fished 4 or 5 separate fishing accesses. And another thing I wanted to touch on is last week on our podcast, we talked about access in the state of New York for hunting. So if you didn't listen to last week's podcast, go back and listen to that one, because we talked a lot about our experience in New York State when we went bow hunting this fall for the rut, and how we were kind of disappointed in New York's access and ability to get onto public lands for hunting. But on the flip side, today I'm very impressed with New York's access for rivers. We saw 8 or 10 river accesses in the 12 miles of river that is available to fish on the salmon. Some of them were closed. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe just because they don't want to maintain them through the winter, or they close it to protect some of the spawning grounds of the steelhead come spring. But total, we saw probably about 8. We fished 4, and the fishing was great. The access sites were nice and clean, big parking lots. So I'm super, super pleased with their access to the Salmon River compared to what we experienced when it came to the hunting access.
Yeah, which it might be, localized to that area due to the river. So we don't have a lot of experience to say whether or not that is, everywhere in the state. But yeah, it was pretty cool to have that much access, and just, it's it makes you think, what are we doing wrong in our local areas? How can we help out in our local areas to try and make there be more access and cleaner facilities, stuff like that. But I had something else going on there.
I think it has a lot to do with the type of water too. Like our trout streams in our areas, we have relatively good access, but they're kind of unmarked, right? So a lot of conservation easement type accesses where you'll park along the road by somebody's house and then access along the edge of their private property and stuff like that. So it was cool to see like designated fishing accesses combined with conservation easements. We saw a lot of signs for that. So it was just a cool experience to be able to enjoy public lands and public land accesses like that. So yeah, it was a cool experience.
So while we were at all these different access points, there were a lot of drift boats. And that's something that, I've been, throwing around in my head as something that would be nice to get eventually someday. We talk about going out west and living out west and having a Western experience. Well, we could have more of those Western experiences here. I just don't, I think when people are like, I want to have a Western experience, they're like, they have this idea that they have to go out west to go on a good float trip or to go on a good horseback riding hunt or something like that. I think about how Clay Newcomb down in Arkansas was killing squirrels off from his mules. So it's all about creating your own experience. Yeah. And that's what I think we need to do more of, locally, is we have plenty of opportunity to do all kinds of different hunting or fishing. And, I think people are looking for that pizzazz of it, something that's different enough to be exciting. So if you're used to like fishing from the shore all the time or from the creek edge, it might be cool or different to jump on a float boat and try that out and see if you like that, you know. And obviously, you know, you could maybe, I don't know if you could rent them places, or you could rent a guide and see if you like it before you commit to buying one eventually. But I think the goal in my mind is over time, you know, start acquiring things like that. Like I just bought a sorry, that truck messed me up. I just bought a aluminum 16-foot boat for, you know, going around on the ponds around our areas, and potentially going on the Susquehanna River where we're at. So over time, I think I want to, you know, maybe I'll get a float boat or a drift boat, or I'll get all these different things to make the experiences a little bit more Western or wild or different. So
yeah, I think the Western experience, in quotations, is something that can be defined differently for everybody, right? So one of the things I like that you said there was different enough to be exciting. And so a lot of times this time of year, you can find yourself with that cabin fever or that seasonal depression of that there's nothing to do in the outdoors. It's cold, you're inside, you're just waking up, going to work, coming home, going to sleep, and then you rinse and repeat. But the different enough to be exciting is something that can really keep that outdoor passion alive this time of year. And that's kind of exactly what we were going for today, right? This isn't something we've ever done before. The gear that we had wasn't perfected or intended for this use.
That's part of it, though.
But that's part of just getting out there and trying this new thing for the first time. Just switching things up, changing gears. And that's what we did a couple weeks ago when we goose hunted with Travis. He just got into it. He turned us onto it, and it opens up a whole nother 2 months after deer season of something to do in the outdoors. And so that different enough to be exciting is definitely something that can help you liven up your experiences outside, and it can just help keep that spark alive this time of year.
Yeah, for example, talking about the goose stuff, for the past couple weeks, I've been practicing my goose call. So, like, if we didn't go on that little trip, and then I decide that, like, I wanted to be better at calling, I've got hours of entertainment trying, and my wife didn't, but I did, of learning how to goose call. So it's all about just getting out there, you know. First and foremost is just getting out there. And then if you feel like you're getting in a rut, change it up. Like if you've been shed hunting and it's not working out, shed a hunt out of your side-by-side or quad, or take your dog and see if he'll find some sheds for you. You know, that's all you got to do is just throw a little curveball and change it up, and you might find something different that excites you. And, you know.
Yeah, I would have to say 2 years ago probably, I was getting burned out on just whitetail hunting, because that's all pretty much my hunting season consisted of. Yeah, because that's the culture that surrounded it. But I think there also has to be said to finding a spouse that supports this kind of lifestyle too, right? Keegan and I's, mine and Keegan's, something like that. Yeah. Wives are spending the day together today with our babies, right? And they let us come out here and do this because they know that
it makes us happy. We live stressful lives, you know. we both of us, you know, they're raising kids, and that's super stressful. But you know, we all have to give each other a little bit of leeway to do our own things, and you know, all it takes is a good day hunting, and that might change a whole week's worth of an attitude. Yeah, definitely.
They know that spending time in the outdoors like this for us definitely shifts the attitude for when we return. We might be tired and ready for a nap when we get home originally, but the adrenaline and the
I would say your overall
just endorphins that you experience spending a day outside like this carry on, and they can definitely tell. So it's definitely important to find yourself a spouse that supports this kind of lifestyle and helps you experience the outdoors like this.
What?
Just for everybody listening, our On the Road podcast is now staring at a Ford van whose tire looks like a rabbit running down the road, bouncing up and down. So that's always fun to lighten the mood. Yeah, so to bring it back to today's Steelhead adventure, we fished 4 holes, a couple runs, but this time of year the the Steelhead really hold in the bottom of those runs where the water temperatures don't fluctuate so much. But we fished 4 holes, and I guess we can talk about our expectations for the day, right? We have now under our belts 6 hours total of steelhead fishing experience, and if you talk to a lot of professional or seasoned steelheaders, 6 hours probably isn't enough experience to even expect to hook into a fish. And so it's definitely a process of learning, and definitely a skill that needs to be honed by practice. It's not something you can expect to go out and just hook into a 10-pound steelhead in the river. But
that's what we were hoping.
Yeah, that would have been nice to hook into a big one of those today. But needless to say, my expectations coming into today, in my head, I was expecting to hook into 1 fish. I wasn't expecting to land, or even my goal wasn't even to, well, I can't say that. My goal was to catch fish today, because that's always the goal. But my expectation was to hook into 1 fish. And that expectation didn't even come to fruition. We fished for 6 hours. We didn't get 1 bite. But that's not to say today was not a successful day. And so the definition of successful when you go experience new things like this has to be realistic, right? Last year on our bear hunt in Montana, the definition of success would have been to kill a bear, but we learned a lot and we grew from the experience. And next time we go out, there's definitely some experience under the belt already. And so the definition of success is going to change. But today's definition of success was that we learned, we met a couple people, we learned from the tackle shop, and we have a little experience under our belt. So I would mark today off as a success because my expectation was realistic, and that was just kind of something important to keep in mind.
Yeah, so my expectations were pretty low. I guess I wasn't expecting to see as many people there, which was pretty wild.
Yeah.
For being how cold it was today, I was expecting not to see many people. I was expecting it to sort of just be us, maybe a few people.
And it's a Monday.
Monday, President's Day, right?
Yeah.
So, right off the bat, there's way more people than I expected. Not enough to be concerned, but just surprised. I figured I had a similar expectation to where like maybe we'll catch 1, which we very well could have been very close.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
So, I'm just still really new. So learning is all that I care about, so I feel like any day I'm out doing something is better than doing nothing. So, like when we were goose hunting, like going goose hunting, I've learned that, I could hear them calling and how my calling was not to their, par.
Yeah.
So I went home and focused on calling more. So I felt like it was a success because I learned more about calling and hanging out with my buddies, and, maybe we laid out the geese not quite right. So when it comes to today, I realized that there's some knots that I need to learn. I don't know quite as much about like tippets and stuff like that, and the different type of weight and where you want that fly in the vertical of the river, whether you want it towards the top or the bottom for different types of fish. It's almost endless. But if you're not going and doing it, then you won't learn anything.
Yeah.
So it's the craziest thing. It's all about getting out there. You can read 1,000,000 books and it might give you some good information, but if you're not using it, then you don't know, you know. You got to experiment and learn, you know. So basically going out today was a success in my mind.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. You know, it's another place to go and make memories. So
yeah, getting out and experiencing is I don't want to say the most important, but it is very close to new experiences, right? I said it once and I'll say it again. We didn't have the ideal gear for today. We didn't have the ideal knowledge for today.
I didn't even look anything up before going. We just went. That's fine too, you know?
Yeah. And so, yeah, it just comes down to you can't get better at something if you don't try. And failure is
good.
Failure is good because I can say personally, my drive to catch a steelhead is higher now after fishing and not catching anything than it was before we even showed up.
Yeah, seeing the carcass, even though it was a carcass, was still impressive. Like, they're a big fish.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were fly fishing a couple of years ago down in Benazet, PA, catching fish the size of our palms, you know. And I was having a blast.
Yeah.
So if I was to catch something like that, I'm sure I'd be hooked for life. Like, we'd be going every single year, like a couple weekends.
Yeah.
But, so, you know, we didn't catch anything today, but I think we have a pretty good chance next time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there was a lot of learning today, and it definitely marks it as a success. So if you don't have anything else to add, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks for listening, guys. If you have any questions about fly fishing or Euro nymphing, we just put a video up on our YouTube. It's definitely another tactic to catch trout. It's not so effective on steelhead, but it's late February. Here in Pennsylvania, we only have one more month until trout season opens, and so Euro nymphing is a super effective tactic to just suction fish out of holes, and that's what my experience with it has been. So if you have any questions about that, head over to our YouTube channel, Barrier Outdoors, and watch the Euro nymphing video we just posted. If you have any questions about steelhead, stay tuned, I guess, and you can learn as we do, and we will throw in any tips or tricks that we learn as we go. And I think that's one of the cool things about this platform is that we've never claimed to be complete experts on anything, but as we learn, you guys will learn along with us. And I think that's a super, super important thing to take home from this.
Yeah,
is that
I'd like to hit on that.
Yeah.
Like, when I feel like it's almost more important than other people like realize, because you always get YouTube videos or books of people that have, you know, they've succeeded, and it's their reflection on their success, and not the actual. Like, I feel like the failure needs to be part of it more, because, you know, if you only see what succeeds, you might be interested in other ways to succeed, but people may have tried that already and failed at it. And if they only show their success, they don't show their failure. And you might be interested in, let's say, you know, it's hard to explain, but let's say there's, let's say you're shooting a bow, and everybody says to shoot this bow a certain way. Because they've succeeded already, and now they're shooting this bow this certain way. And maybe you're shooting that way, but you're not quite feeling it, and you change the position of your hand, and that doesn't quite work. If those experts have showed that change of that hand position didn't work, then you wouldn't even be tempted to try that. So I feel like when it comes to, it's a long way to explain it. It might be going through some of your ears, but
down a rabbit hole.
If you can't see failure, you know, other people fail, I feel like it's not as genuine, and, you know, you get a
not
more,
quite as relatable.
Yeah, I feel like it's a more whole experience. You're getting everything, so instead of just the good. So
yeah, you guys can follow right along with us as we learn these things. And so I guess that's where we'll wrap it up today. Like I said, head over to our YouTube channel, check out some of the stuff we got coming up, and we've posted recently. Lots of great stuff hitting there. And like as we said, the spring is right around the corner. Snow's getting ready to melt. So turkeys are going to start getting ready to gobble. Trout are going to start hitting the streams. I say that tongue in cheek because most of the streams we fish in Pennsylvania are stock trout. So we got to wait for the trucks to fill up the streams, but yeah, there's some great springtime stuff on its way. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening on Spotify, follow us on Spotify. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching if you're joining us on YouTube. And we'll catch you on the next episode of Beyond the Barrier.